You talk about two scenarios, right? There's two possible scenarios that we can go down when it comes to COVID-19. So I want to talk about worst case scenario first and what that looks like, and then I want to talk about the other scenario that's a possibility as a nation, or maybe even as a whole, the entire world, because I think we're all coming together for this. So what are those scenarios first?
So scenario one is the scenario that we don't go into full-scale lockdown here in the US. So on March 11th, I published a video that said the United States will be in lockdown within 30 days. And then a week later, I changed that prediction to say the United States will be in lockdown within 15 days of March 18th, right? And as you can see, it's moving in that direction. So scenario one says we don't go into a complete lockdown. We let this thing just explode. In that scenario, 40 to 150 million Americans get infected. Between 2.4 million and 8 million Americans die in the next 3 months. Sounds crazy because we didn't lose that many people in either of the world wars. But that is the default scenario, believe it or not. And a lot of people are saying this is just the flu, don't understand this. I mean, there are people 30 years old that are hooked up to machines right now in New York, 30-year-old marathon runners with no history of smoking that cannot breathe. And if they didn't have a ventilator today, they would die. This is not the flu. The flu never did that to anybody. The flu killed a small percentage of the people that it infected, 0.1%. This thing is killing 1 to 1.5% in countries where the healthcare system is not overwhelmed. It's killing 5 to 8% in countries like Italy where the healthcare system is overwhelmed. Bottom line, though, is people have to be on ventilators for weeks for their lungs to recover. Currently, New York has approximately 3% of the ventilators that it needs, which means that we are about to see, and this is, by the way, at this point, and we're recording this on the 24th of March. This is inevitable. We are about to see a catastrophic tragedy take place in the state of New York. Now you say, Neal, we're not talking about the US here. We're not talking about the world. It's going to happen in many places around the world. It's already happened in Italy. It's already happened in Spain. But neither Italy nor Spain had a problem as bad as the city of New York does. So at this point, knowing what I know, I can predict that we are about to see a massive number of casualties in New York. And you might say, well, that's going to happen in the future. No, you don't understand how this virus works. Because people can be infected for 2 weeks without symptoms, those people that are going to die are already infected. We just haven't counted them yet. Wow. So at this point, the true count of people in New York that are infected is somewhere over 250,000. So it's between 250,000 and 1 million people that are already infected but are not counted yet. They don't have ventilators for them. They don't have hospital beds. And even if they had beds, they don't have people to man those beds. So we are going to see a tragedy roll out across New York. And it is our job to prevent it from happening in other places, to follow the example of California and other states. So on March 11th, when I recorded that presentation and I said the US will go into full lockdown in 30 days, people made fun of me, right? And people thought that for some reason this was a political statement. They thought that I was a Democrat and I was opposed to, business, and for some reason I didn't like Trump. None of that is true. I mean, this has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with math. Exponential numbers are the problem, Derry. The human brain is designed only to understand things like 1, 2, 3, 4. But the virus thinks in terms of 1, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 1 million, 10 million. Yeah. On March 1st, we had 75 cases in the United States. On March 1st. Today is March 24th. I think we're over 40,000 cases. 75, 40,000, 23 days. Now you exponentially move that up, and 2/3 of the country is infected by the end of May. 2/3, actually by the end of April. So bottom line is, we've never faced anything like this. We've never faced it in 2008. We haven't faced it in 2001. We haven't faced it during the oil crisis. We haven't even faced this during the world wars. The reason for that is, here's an enemy that can fight and grow its forces in 193 countries at the same time and multiply itself every 3 days. It doubles its forces every third day. You want to check this? Go take a look at any graph that shows that exponential growth and go back and check to see what the count was 3 days ago. check Spain, check UK, check Germany, check Italy, check the US. Every third day, this virus doubles itself, which means that it becomes more and more powerful every single day in every single country in the world. The bottom line is there's one way to fight it. We know it works because the China already tried it. Now in Italy, we're seeing a very significant decline in cases because of that. So we know it works. And that is a full-scale lockdown. I'm not even talking about shelter in place. I'm talking about a step beyond that. What India did yesterday.
And this is scenario 2 we're getting to, correct?
This is scenario 2. Scenario 2 is us getting out without having hundreds of millions of deaths. And I have seen starting last Thursday, right? So we're on the 24th. So let me look at what Thursday was. Thursday was 19th of April, 5 days ago. The first state in the US to go into lockdown, or they call it shelter in place, was California. In 5 days, 16 of our other states have followed suit. So today, on the 24th, 17 US states are in shelter in place, or lockdown, if you want to call it that. And then there's a whole bunch of other cities that are in lockdown. Dallas has gone into lockdown, so has Nashville, Philadelphia, and St. Louis. So major cities, even though their states haven't declared it, major cities have said, enough is enough. We know what happens here. We're seeing the human tragedy happen in real time in New York. We don't want to be next. This is scenario 2. What we have seen already from the places that lockdown happened, Hong Kong, China, and Italy, is that 3 weeks of lockdowns causes a crest. So the first week and a half, nothing changes. You're just going nuts, and people are like, this isn't working. No, because the cases you are seeing in the first 2 weeks are the cases from the previous 2 weeks before the lockdown. Now you're identifying those cases. You're counting those cases. It's working, but everything has a 2-week lag. So today, you cannot tell that California is doing well. You cannot tell that yet because it went into lockdown 5 days ago on the 19th. But I can tell you 5 days from today, you will see California's cases start to crest. It'll start to first slow, then it'll start to crest. We'll still get more cases every day, but the growth rate is going to slow down. Today, New York adds 50% new cases every day, right? At 50%, they're dead. They just don't know it yet. They need to get that down to about 5%. And are other places down to 5%? Yes, Iran, after their 3 weeks of lockdown, is at 5% today. So it can be done. Italy was at 10% yesterday, and they haven't even finished their 3 weeks of full nationwide lockdown. It slows in every single case. We haven't seen any country not slow if it doesn't go into lockdown. The problem is today on the 24th, only 1/2 of America is in lockdown. 148 million out of our 323 million people are in lockdown. The problem is the other half. This half can see insane spread, and that's part of the problem. So we need to continue seeing this trend. Every day for the last 5 days, at least 3 states have gone into lockdown. And what I want to see is more of the states going into lockdown, because that is phase 2. And so we talked about.
I'm a little partial, Neal, and I'm a little biased towards Texas. So I want a little bit more info on Texas. And like I told you, I've been in Mexico for the past month. So I'm just now catching up with things and figuring out where things lay. If you have any information to give us or to look up. Really, in terms of California and New York, I understand they're going in 2 totally different directions. Where does Texas fall as one of the? Go ahead.
Dallas has done well because Dallas is now in shelter in place as a metro. But Texas is doing really poorly. In fact, Texas is doing the exact reverse of what they should be doing, because their governor has made a public statement yesterday saying, I am 70 years old. I want to take the hit. Let's open up our economy. I don't think that this person understands what he's doing. I don't think that he is listening to the doctors. I don't think that he understands the exponential function. Remember, we're wired to do 1, 2, 3, 4. This virus is wired to do 1, 10, 100, 1,000. So by the time our mind gets to 4, the virus has gotten from 1 to 1,000. You see what I mean? That is the beast that we deal with. That is what we deal with. I mean, if this is the Earth of the Avengers, this thing is Thanos, right? Thanos killed half of the population of the universe. This thing, between its economic damage and its health damage, is capable of killing half the people on the planet. Other countries are doing the right thing. We are doing the right thing only in certain states. Did you hear India went into a lockdown, not a shelter in place? They allow a 3-hour window every other day for people to come out of their house and buy groceries. 3 hours every other day.
Wow.
Otherwise, when you're in the street, they'll immediately arrest you.
Wow.
Bottom line is, that is what worked in Hubei. China showed us a way through this process. And scenario 2 is that process. And I believe we will get there. I believe, for those of you that want to know about this, I created a website called coronavirusrealestate.com. So easy to figure out, coronavirusrealestate.com. Go in there and watch my video on March 11th. And then, because you're watching that video on my website, you can click the YouTube link and start reading the remarks, and you'll see how many people didn't believe. And then a week later, when I updated the video, there were more people that were believing. And day after tomorrow, the 25th, when I update the video again, there will still be more people. So despite the fact that people mistrust what the media is saying, I think that there's more people that are beginning to understand the danger that we're in, which is why today, on the 24th of March, I believe scenario 2 is going to happen. And scenario 2 is the country goes into a lockdown, and we do it for 3 weeks, per state, some states starting, later than other states. And when we come out of it, we've controlled it to the point, we can't kill it, but we can control it to the point where we can have an economy again. I have to say Congress has done a really good job. As of today, that package is just about ready for signature. I think it'll be signed later today. It gives people 4 months of their salaries. That's April, May, June, and July. 4 months of salary. So in my mind, Congress has done a wonderful job. And that was what was needed because landlords need to get paid. The good news is yesterday, Fannie and Freddie announced that as long as we don't evict our tenants, we don't have to pay our mortgage. Yeah. Right? That was a big deal. A lot of people are saying, why should I get into real estate when my tenants don't pay? The answer is, as long as your tenants are not paying, you're not paying either. Yeah. Right? So there's a balance here. And at some point, your tenants will pay. Keep in mind that not every tenant all of a sudden is going to say, oh, I don't need to pay just because my landlord cannot evict me. Many of them will pay because money is coming in from the government. Yeah. Right? So not only are people going to receive $3,000 cash checks from the government, they're going to get employment benefits for 4 months. Yeah. No one in history has ever done 4 months of employment benefits for basically 1/4 of the country being laid off. Yeah. So this is a big deal. And this is a very positive statement. As long as we can do the lockdown, we now have the money to do the lockdown. We have the time to do the lockdown. So the only X factor in this solution is us reopening the country too early. Wow. We've got to let every area have at least 3 weeks of lockdown. If you want to learn from the Chinese, Hubei province came out of the province that was affected by the initial outbreak, 80,000 people. They came out of lockdown after 8 weeks. The Chinese are really good with math. They know what's happening. If we don't do 3 weeks or 4 weeks for all parts of the US, we won't be able to stop this. Then we go into scenario 1, and in scenario 1, real estate is worthless. Yeah. It's liquid, it's worthless. I couldn't care less about my properties at that point of time because the human tragedy will be so much greater that money will not matter. Yeah. But in scenario 2, here's what happens. We slow this thing down. We have our lockdown. The lockdowns pretty much end at the end of April, right? So that today is March 24th. So it ends about 34, 36 days from now. And then one by one, states start coming out of lockdown after they've done their 3 or 4 weeks. They start coming out of lockdown and the economy starts to spool up again in May. Still, huge job losses in May. So April job losses, May job losses, June job losses. But by July, we should see positive job gains. And in August, we should see huge job gains. All of those jobs that were lost coming back because of the fiscal stimulus that we are injecting into the economy. But at the same time, in August, we should see lots and lots of single families, multifamilies, all kinds of assets that are distressed assets available in the market, not at 50% or 70% off like 2008. This is not it. If you're going to wait for 50% off, you're going to be waiting forever. But you might see 10, 20, and even 30% off, maybe in some parts of the US. Certainly in New York, you'll see assets at prices that you've never heard of. the lowest price of all is going to be New York, for sure, because no other state has the insane problem that New York has created for itself, right? By not taking the lockdown actions until they took them a couple of days ago. Should have locked down a week ago because they realized how bad their problem was. They chose not to lock down their state. So you'll see a huge number of bargains in Q3. You'll see interest rates lower than they've ever been. You'll see fiscal stimulus. You'll see the economy recovering. Don't hesitate to act, because you've kicked yourself for not doing it before in 2008, 2009. Make sure that you don't miss out on it this time.
I love it. I love it. Neal, this has been crazy. This has been so much good information. I know the listeners just like, wow, like I'm blown away. And I want to speak to, again, maybe and we'll get into a little bit more of the investors who are looking to invest in the future, and also the investors who invest now that are still looking to invest here in the next few quarters. But I want to talk to the current investors who invest in multifamily, who invest in single family. And I want to talk to what things are looking like today. Like when you look at the real estate terrain in terms of sales volume, in terms of pricing, in terms of inventory, what sharp declines have you seen, and what things have you seen just remain constant?
Nothing's remained constant. I've never seen anything like it. At this point of time, banks are backing away. Banks are requesting 12 months of mortgage, in pounds. So that's raising the amount of equity that we're raising. Banks are pulling back and saying, I'm not going to give you a loan for as much. The value is down. And then, unlike single family, where mortgage rates are going down, and multifamily mortgage rates are going up because banks are freaking out. So there's no good news to be had in commercial real estate for the next 2 or 3 months. There's good news. This leads to us all making more money if we stay in. The key is you have to survive the next 5 months, next 4 or 5 months. You have to survive. And you've been given the tools to do that. If you have properties, apply for mortgage abatement, because they've already allowed you to not pay your mortgage. So don't fight it, because there's only so much you can tell your tenants at this point in time until those tenants mentally feel better. And I assure you, the news will get a lot worse, especially because of New York, before it gets better, right? Very few people are going to realize that they're going to listen to the human tragedy over the next 30 days in New York and assume that all of that is going to happen to the rest of the US. I'm telling you, it might happen to a few other places in the US, but it's not going to be the same. New York didn't act in time. Right? Many others have acted in time. When Trump declared a nationwide, reduction, they, closed restaurants, things like that, that helped everyone except for New York. So don't just believe the bad news. Research the numbers. On the commercial real estate side, there's no good news to be had, and there will not be good news for another 60 to 90 days.
So
here's where the good news is.
What is the common thought amongst potential home sellers and potential home buyers? Like, are people buying right now? Should we as investors be looking to buy? What are prices telling us?
So right now, the market is not falling in prices. It's just falling in volume. So single family home, sales that were happening, some of them have dropped. But a lot of it is just people can't go to open houses, so nothing is selling. So buyers are pulling back. They're pulling their properties that were listing. They're pulling them back. So the market on the single family side is not dropping. It's frozen, right? So when it's frozen, the only thing you can say is volume is down, not prices are down. So for the moment, you aren't seeing a lot of price reduction in the single family side. Multifamily is seeing price reductions. Why? Because people are retrading. So everybody who was in contract is coming back and saying, hey, I haven't given you earnest money. I'm going to retrade this property. I'm sorry, I can't pay you the same price, because the bank is not willing to accept that price. They're not willing to give me a loan. They want more money. The value of the property is down. So multifamily very quickly, you've seen price drops of 5% so far. It's a very small window of time, but we've seen about a 5% drop there, and a lot of retrading activity going on. But as of the last 2 or 3 days, multifamily transactions are also freezing because no one can do due diligence. Banks are closed. Cities are closed. So transactions have simply stopped. And I don't think that they will start up for the next 30 to 45 days. And in 30 to 45 days, we will have good news. Everyone will have good news. 2 kinds of good news. Number 1, practically every tenant that lives in every multifamily in America will have received somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. I'm assuming that it's a family of 4, so $3,000. If it's a family of 2, then $2,000. If it's a family of 1, then $1,000. right? So they will have received helicopter money being thrown from helicopters practically at them. And then on top of that, they would have realized that they don't need to pay. They don't need to work for the next 4 months. They get paid a salary, whatever salary they were getting in February or March. They get that same salary for 4 months, and they get paid to sit at home. So if they were serving as a restaurant waiter and they were making $12 an hour, they still get to make $12 an hour for up to 4 months. We've never done that across the board in the United States.
And who does that affect best? I mean, the first things that those tenants are thinking about is, hey, I'm going to go get food. But after that, it's paying my rent, right? I mean,
exactly. So rent is number two. And so that is the good news for us. That's the good news we're going to hear about in 4 to 5, 6 weeks. Rent is always number two after food. And even though some people, many of those tenants realize that they don't have to pay their rent this month and they can't be evicted, we have lots of messaging. We're going to say, we can't evict you, but we can still report you, right? So, and keep in mind that we're going to queue you up for eviction. And so you don't want to get there, because whenever we can evict you, we're going to evict you immediately at that point in time. So we have tools at our disposal, and we're going to use those tools, right? And I'm not suggesting that we be nasty to our tenants. This is actually a time to be good. Yeah. This is a time to be good. So my primary strategy is, for every single property that I have, I'm going to apply for mortgage abatement, right? So I'm going to simply stop paying my mortgages. I'm going to let my banks know, who are at this point are very flexible, right? Banks are very inflexible right now if you want to buy properties, but banks are very flexible right now if you don't want to pay your mortgage, because they have received instructions from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to allow you to not pay mortgages. So I'm going to take advantage of that. And I'm going to try not to stress out my tenants or kill them. If they're paying, great, I'll take their money. If they're not paying, I'll give them options like, do you want to defer your payment for 1 month and I can add your payment to the next month? If they don't want to do that, I'll say, well, how about this month? How much can you pay me? Oh, I can pay $500. Oh, your payment's $1,000. Can I apply $500 of your deposit? And they say yes. Great. I make a lease amendment and I apply $500 their deposit. So I do as many things as I can, right, to help my tenants. And worst case, if they don't pay, it's okay, because I'm not paying my mortgage either.